Thank you so much for coming. We've talked a lot about different asset classes. We've talked a lot about different markets. Let's start with, how is life at the moment, Will?
Well, across the different assets, I mean, you all listened to our market report yesterday. The supply and some of the most active markets has dwindled, and as actually, dare we say it, turned into sometimes a seller's market in certain different segments, especially in the light twins. There are active buyers right now in several of the segments. Again, the heavies are challenging, but in the light twins and the singles, there's still quite a bit of a demand, and supply is dwindling.
Nadav?
Yeah, I think somewhat in line with what Will was saying, we look at it a bit differently, more on a mission perspective. Yes, there's no doubt that the past few years have been difficult and challenging for the industry as a whole, but that's a bit misleading because the industry, and again, I know oil and gas is the core, and it is really a majority of our business as well, but it's not the whole industry. So yes, the downturn, difficult period did start when oil and gas became difficult a few years ago. That directly had an effect on other mission assets or mission categories that affected the whole industry. But then again, utility and other mission segments have been successful later on. And once some of the oil and gas aircraft that were not on contract were beginning to be absorbed, the industry or other missions became more active, and I think utility is strong, VIP is okay now. Oil and gas, hopefully, if the coming months will be all right, will maybe come back, and therefore I think the time is okay, and there are several areas that are successful right now.
Why is VIP only okay?
You want me to say it's good?
No, but why is it only okay?
Mostly because of North America and some areas outside, but North America and the heavier, medium and light twins.
Mark, you like to inventory as well, don't you? So, what types are you looking at buying at the moment?
So, the 109S Grand is one that we've had success with over the years, transitioning from corporate to aeromedical. The other thing we've noticed is a lot of small business owners are wanting to fly, have their own aircraft. A lot of them want to learn how to fly, so we've seen a swing in demand for light singles, from long rangers to 407s, A-Star B3s, B2s. And the aeromedical, I think, is the most active in North America right now. The demand is just crazy right now. They've got a lot. Utilization is the highest I think it's been, and there's no stopping aeromedical right now in the U.S. So those are the big segments. Offshore for us has dropped off over the years, but we've made it up somewhat in other areas.
So, well, you're North American based at the moment, although soon moving to France. Would you agree the North American market's doing nicely? Bonus depreciation's made a difference for some corporates.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a mix of that as well, but really it's been a big push in the EMS industry in the U.S. to maintain fleet commonality. So basically, all the Pratt and Whitney P2 pluses we're talking about EC-135s here. The supply at the top end of the market has basically completely evaporated, I believe, as we said, and it's the truth. You can't find one. I was looking at the numbers the other day, and from P2 plus to present day, there's about 300 and some odd ships in the U.S., and of which less than 15 are now in VIP configuration. They're all walked up by the EMS market. So again, there's this again where there is demand, the supply is really low, and you are starting to see a seller's market. People are ready to pay and step up. Same with the AC-145, and I think that trend is going to continue for at least the next year.
Any other sellers' markets?
I think in several assets, yes. For us, it's been much more apparent in the utility market, actually. Light singles and firefighting aircraft. Older 412s, long rangers in the singles. 407s right now.
Yeah, I would agree. The 407 is probably the most in demand single right now.
long nose 139, also very demand. There's a lot of demand for that right now. If anybody's got one.
So regionally, we're seeing a lot of demand for pre-owned or second-hand helis in North America. Latin America?
You know, a lot of the stuff in Latin America stays in Latin America. There's a big tax that's imposed in Brazil. It's very difficult to buy out of Brazil because the sellers want to try to capitalize on their tax that they paid, which generally doesn't happen. It's a currency too. When the currency devalues, aircraft tend to leave the country. That's something we've observed over the years. But the tax issue in Brazil is a hindrance. We did buy one out of Brazil last year, but it was a bit of a challenge. But it wasn't because of the price. It was just regulation and schedules, and people don't move as fast as maybe we'd like them to.
Yeah, just for us, it's been more VAP in North America, but in other segments, it's been Southern Africa as a territory. Australia, New Zealand's been okay, and North and Southeast Asia have been fairly stable.
And now, as an Asian-based broker, are you worried about the year ahead, or are you going to be selling out of the region, or is it too early to say?
We're always selling in and out. I'm not worried per se, but I do think this is going to impose, and already is imposing, significant challenges to be able to do business internationally, not only for helicopters and many other industries as well. So we're a little bit concerned, but mitigating it.
Okay, we've got a panel coming up afterwards with appraisers, and there's been a lot of talk about how to establish the price. How do you guys do it?
Well, we use basically an FMV system that we've developed where we look at the last 3 to 5 transactions in a certain market segment for a model, and then do a comparative value analysis against those transactions. And then to get a better view of the market, we also do the same process but with the closest 3 to 5 on-market competitors, and that really gives you a street view of the market and empowers the client. It gives the client the intel they need to say, all right, if we want to sell in the next X amount of days, how do we position ourselves on the market to attract the next buyer to say, if I properly look at the market, this is the ship to buy. It's something I keep saying to my clients is that with good intel, you don't make bad decisions. So and that's basically how we put it together.
So we do a similar thing. We look at the aircraft. If it's less than 1,000 hours, then we don't do a component assessment. But if it's more than 1,000 hours, we'll evaluate the weighted value of the components. We'll go out and through our friends and contacts try to get other comparisons and do a component value comparison, because if you're not comparing the component weighted value, then they're skewing the numbers, and so that's a big thing. But it's hard to get comps. So you've got to have a good network of people that will be willing to share information with you. And but that's the value of an agent and broker. That's what we do for our clients to maximize whether they're buying or selling. That's just part of what we do.
I think both approaches are definitely essential and needed. We do take both approaches in the sense that we do have a desktop appraisal, which is more of a technical level, plus a market perspective, which is to us maybe the more important part, or gives a higher weight in terms of what we feel the aircraft is worth. But then on the final fair market value, which is a combination of those, there's also, and was discussed earlier as well, what the real liquidation value is, which is what it will sell for now if you had to sell it. So we'll give a combination of those.
Is there a hard link between price and number of days on market for a time?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a correlation between a price and how long it's been on the market. A lot of people price their aircraft by what they see advertised in the different publications, but generally sellers don't have the data to see, okay, this X price, it's on the market for 6 months. And so we like to show our clients that this is, we ask them, how soon do you want to sell the aircraft? Do you want to sell it in 3 months or 6 months? And give them some information so that they can, they always want to maximize their price, but at what cost, right? In what period of time? And so that's a consideration.
If I could add to that, I mean, I remember I had a fellow I worked for who said, there's no bad aircraft, there's just bad price expectations. So any aircraft can be sold, any aircraft has a market if you're willing to face the reality of what the price point is going to be.
Most aircraft.
Almost.
What about trying to make your aircraft look more attractive? I know historically a lot of financiers don't like investing in paintwork or avionics when they've taken an aircraft back. You know, it doesn't feel like, you know, like an arbitrage that you put 5 million in, or sorry, not 500,000 in, you're going to get that back. Thoughts?
Well, if you can sell the aircraft without having to do anything, that's great. But what often happens is you have to decide, you know, how do you want to compete in the market? Do you want to compete on value or price, or you look at what's out there and you know, where do you want to position yourself? You can do an assessment to do some major or some minor value improvements that'll improve your position in the market to make it more attractive to the target market that you're after. So a lot of sellers are not interested in that, but you know, if it's been on the market a while, maybe they'll consider it. The other thing that's really important is that buyers, a lot of time in the utility space where I work, is they'll obtain a contract and they'll need an aircraft ready to go to work within a very short period of time. So a 412, for instance, that might need 6 months worth of work is not going to be an attractive aircraft for them. But if an operator has 500 hours or 1,000 hours remaining and 1 or 2 years left on the inspections, then you know they can take that aircraft, do some minor modifications for the equipment. They might need avionics and radios, and then go to work relatively quickly. So it kind of depends on the asset, but minor value improvements can go a long way in maximizing your value and reducing your days on market.
Making an aircraft attractive is definitely important, and it's a challenge often. Us as an Asian-based company, we face that all the time. Not that the aircraft are in good condition, but the perception is often not great. And I hope we've done somewhat of a decent job to change that perception, because there are excellent assets out there that are properly taken care of, and if handled right by people who know how to maneuver in the region, it can be done nicely, and that's part of making the aircraft look good. Aside from that, yes, there are aircraft that could be in not so great component time, or others that are not beautiful, etc. There's a way to present it and turn it into a good deal if it is such.
I add that it's also a little bit configuration based. If it's a VIP aircraft and you're looking to sell to the VIP market, you might want to clean up some scuff marks on the skids or something like that that a VIP buyer would identify very quickly. Otherwise, yeah, I agree with Mark. It really, you'd want the aircraft. A minimal investment would be, you know, making sure the maintenance is all up to date and ready to go. So when the buyer comes, they can again turnkey, like you said. And that's really the best value added, because, you know, a large investment to reconfigure the aircraft doesn't make a lot of sense. You almost want to deconfigure the aircraft so that's a base model that a buyer can use to their own requirements. Because even if you have an EMS configured 145 in Europe, you may have a buyer whose whole fleet is comprised of Bucher interiors, and they've got an AAT, and it's just not going to work. They're going to have to make a significant investment to absorb that aircraft into their fleet. So having it, you know, having the aircraft be nimble and who can buy it and put it to work quickly is a real added value.
I think turnkey is great, but from our experience, quite often it's almost impossible. Either the owners or operators are not willing or able to make that investment to make it that attractive, and often some of the buyers don't want it to be turnkey because that's where the opportunity may be. If they're willing to go through the extra challenge and length of doing something that's a bit more difficult, it will take more time, it could be a good buy for them.
You know, I see that, my experience has been that that's the case for a buyer that has some time to do the work. You know, a lot of times, utility space, they'll buy an aircraft that needs work, but they're planning to keep their guys busy in the shop for 6 months, or they're a wholesale buyer and they'll take it the way it is, right? But it depends on the buyer, right? It depends on what kind of buyer they are, whether they're a corporate retail buyer or a utility guy that's looking for a good deal to do some in-house work.
What about moving aircraft? Like Nadav, do you ever ship an aircraft over to the US to make it more sellable?
Yes, several times.
And then it's always built by a
but it's
Japanese
not,
buyer.
it's not always, no, it's not always a solution. Yeah, that's also true. But no, it really depends on the aircraft and where its largest market is and what its mission potential is. So if the owners realize that and they listen to our advice, so yes, it could help sometimes. But other areas, just moving out of more difficult countries to somewhere else that's more neutral also helps.
Mark, you prefer N-registered aircraft?
Yes, yeah. One of the things that we've done that's been successful is we've obtained U.S. airworthiness registration on aircraft based in Europe. We felt the dominant market was in the United States. Even if the buyer wasn't in the U.S., it's easily exportable to many other countries with, you know, it's adopted to the Airworthiness Authority in most countries. So we've done that, but you have to maintain the aircraft per U.S. regulations, so you've got to have the right people to be able to maintain the aircraft, and you usually have to put it in a trust. But that's something that we've done that made it easy for our buyer to buy the aircraft and had an N number on it. We shipped it over, and they put the blades on it and went to work with it. So it was a convenient thing to do, and so that can work sometimes for you.
I'm a strong supporter of it, especially if it's in a somewhat exotic location. A lot of buyers have trepidation when looking at an aircraft that's in a Far East country or in a jurisdiction that doesn't really link up with the FAA or EASA, and typically maybe even after when we have the first discussion of a price readjustment, maybe they say now is the time to, as opposed to adjusting the price, let's reposition the aircraft. We've had success with it several times in the past.
Well, how often do you end up finding it's being shipped back? Just sod's law.
5 times in the last year, in the last 2 years, something around that, a couple times.
Okay, so if you've got...
Sorry, it's giving options, and that's really our job, is talking to the client and finding options. This is not a passive. These are not passive sales. They're very proactive. You have to be consistently providing possibilities, and you said it, looking outside the box. But if we've got, sorry to go back to the Airbus product line again, but if 135 T2s are selling in Europe, well, then it's not going to do very well in Azerbaijan or in Brazil. So let's put it where it's going to be seen by the people who have who are the most likely to buy it. Put it to work, get it out there. People, that's the best way to improve your visibility and in my opinion, improve your chance for success.
One of the things that I think attracted people to the sector, investors, was reconfiguration. And how easy is it to reconfigure most types? Are there some types where there's just no obvious second life?
Yeah, there are. Like I was talking about before, 412s and 212s went from offshore to utility. You can take a Grand and go to air medical. It's not so complicated. You can take a corporate 407 and make it air medical or utility. It's difficult to go from EMS to corporate. It's difficult to go from offshore to corporate. It's expensive, and depending if the OEM is able to support the technical data to provide that at no cost like Bell does, it makes it easier. Some OEMs are not willing or able to do that, and it makes it harder. So some configurations can be switched, and some cannot.
Yeah, I think actually carefully saying almost everything has a second life. Something maybe 2 years ago I thought is impossible, but we've learned that it is the case actually. So second life, I mean second mission, a different life in a sense. It's not easy for several types, but for most of them, slowly, it takes a long time, but eventually over a course of several years, they find a home and a different mission. We've done strange ones. We talked about it earlier about 76s that actually could be doing firefighting, as non-economical as it may sound, but we've done some of those. 412s that are shifting missions as well. Yes, it's not easy, but it's doable.
Yeah, a lot of these kits are pretty plug and play, and if you know where to go to find used kits, they are somewhat readily available in my experience. I think that's also a buy-side solution. You know, I was talking earlier about giving your seller, your client, the seller options. Personally, I like to, if I have a listing, I like to reach out to an EMS provider, maybe a firefighter or you know, offshore, and get a quote for a swap and get a kit lined up. So when the right client calls you with that profile, you can say, hey, by the way, I've already got a line on getting this thing ready to go. We can have it ready to go in 60 days for you. So just options.
And it's not the first choice, it's the second choice. You know, you first want to keep it in the same configuration if you can. It's the outside the box type of thinking. Now, what can we do with this now?
But on that note, actually, one of the questions in the previous panel was whether the older oil and gas aircraft are on their way out and have they reached the end of their lives. And those aircraft, in my opinion, have to be repurposed because, yes, I think most of the older medium-sized oil and gas aircraft have reached the end of their lives. And C++, of course, is a classic example, and maybe C++ is soon, too.
Okay. We talked about storage a bit yesterday, but are you advising any sellers to just park it and leave it for a few years? I know you don't get commission on those deals, but...
So I'll comment on that. So the thing that we really want to encourage is, and it's mostly private individuals, it's not industry people generally. Industry people are commercial operators, but private individuals, they'll park the aircraft, they won't run it, they don't preserve it, and they're diminishing their value tremendously. And it's a shame because there's really no good reason for that. Commercial operators will run the aircraft, document it, or they'll preserve it, and that's what you want if it's going to sit for a long time. Now, even if it's an F-76, people don't think there's going to be a second life, and it's going to be not going to operate anymore. If you preserve the components, then you know, someone that's going to buy the aircraft on a part-out basis, well, you'll have a better opportunity.
Yeah, I think it's too much unknown to tell someone to park it for a few years, but we could advise, for example, to wait a little bit until the market is less saturated.
If you've got an option to keep it working, keep it working. You know, these machines need to move, and if the objective is to sell it, but then you're going to wait and just be running, you know, manufacturer minimums to keep it up to date, prepare yourself for a big PPI bill.
Okay, do we have any questions or comments from the room? Okay, if you... Oh, yeah, sorry. Microphone's just coming. Sorry. And definitely, all comments, whatever you want.
I'll just speak up. Exchange rates, do you see that having an impact on the trading value of the aircraft fluctuation?
So the question is, are you seeing fluctuation of interest rates having an impact?
Well, exchange rates definitely contribute to the trading of aircraft. As I mentioned, when a currency devalues in a country, aircraft tend to leave that country. And so we've seen that. And that's a strategy, too. You know, you keep an eye on the exchange rates, and you know, there's internal pressures in the country to sell. And so, yeah, it can be an advantage. It's not always something you can count on, but certainly a factor.
So you mean then, sorry, I've got a working microphone. Sorry, everybody. So you mean that aircraft would then typically move out of the jurisdiction where the currency is plummeting to be sold in another jurisdiction with a better currency? Do you see fluctuations due to exchange rate within sort of the North American market or the European market? Does that affect it at all?
You know, I don't think so. It's just it can be a benefit or a curse. You know.
Two examples, Brazil and South Africa. Brazil a while ago had a large fluctuation, which impacted on their ability to actually accept dollars that were more valuable for them. South Africa right now in the opposite position with their rand.
You know, and when the trend is down, I mean, it can be an opportunity. When the euro is down, yeah, it's an opportunity for North Americans to get a better deal on an A-Star, for instance, like that. But you know, it's a strategic tool, you might say, but you know, it depends on the buyer. People, you know, unless they're waiting for time and trying to find the right period of time to buy a helicopter based on exchange rates, that's usually not the case. But if you have time and you're a dealer and you're trying to find the right deal, well, it can be a strategy for you.
I mean, the pound and the euro have been down over the last 18 months compared to the dollar, and there's been a buying spree by U.S. operators.
Okay, any more questions? Okay. Financing. Would you guys like people in this room to give you warehouse financing so you can inventory your own aircraft?
Sure.
Totally.
But of course, yes. You know,
Would you buy now?
yes.
Sure, certain models.
Which ones?
Good. There are good buys in late model 145s right now that are, depending on the configuration, I keep ringing the bell, but yes, 135s in the right configuration, even legacy models can be very, I think could be lucrative.
B3s, older 412s, 407s, 206s, L3s, well, long rangers, L4s, no problem.
407s, 135s, 145s.